Imagine waking up and not knowing where you are. The air smells different. The walls glow with colors you have never seen before. The sounds around you are soft but strange. And when you open your eyes fully, you realize something that makes your heart stop completely. Every single face looking down at you is not human. They are beautiful. They are powerful. And they are all women. This is not a dream. This is not a simulation. This is real. And you are the only human man for millions of miles in every direction. Nobody sent a rescue signal. Nobody back home even knows you are missing. And the beings surrounding you have never seen a creature like you before in their entire lives. But here is the part that will truly shock you. They were waiting for someone like you. They just never expected it to be this soon. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most incredible stories ever told in the world of science fiction. A story about survival, identity, and the kind of connection that changes two entire worlds forever. There are three things in this story that will completely blow your mind. First, the station itself. It should not exist. Every known star map says that region of space is completely empty. But it is there, hidden, massive, and alive with energy. Second, the women who run it. They are not just aliens. They are the most advanced civilization in the known galaxy. And they have been alone for a very, very long time. Third, what happens when one ordinary human man from Earth walks into their world without warning and changes absolutely everything? Let me show you exactly how this happened. His name was Caleb Harris. He was 32 years old. He was not famous. He was not special in any way that would make headlines back on Earth. He was just a maintenance engineer on a deep space cargo freighter called the Meridian Star. His job was simple. Fix things. When they broke, keep the ship running. Stay out of trouble. He had been doing this job for 6 years. And in 6 years, nothing interesting had ever happened to him. Not once. The Meridian Star was on a routine supply run between a mining colony on Europa and a research outpost near the edge of the outer asteroid belt. It was a trip that took about 11 days. Caleb had made this exact trip 23 times before. He could do it in his sleep. And on the night everything changed, he basically was doing it in his sleep. It was 0300 hours ship time. The rest of the small crew of 7 was asleep in their bunks. Caleb was the overnight maintenance watch. His job during these quiet hours was to walk through the engine rooms every 2 hours, check the readings, log everything, and make sure nothing was overheating or leaking. It was the most boring job in the entire universe. He was fine with that. He had just finished his first walkthrough and was sitting in the small maintenance bay eating a protein bar and reading an old paperback novel he had found at a station market 3 months ago. The novel was about a man who discovers a hidden kingdom under the ocean. Caleb thought it was pretty good. He never got to find out how it ended. At exactly 0317 hours, every single light on the ship went out. Not just dimmed. Not a flicker. Every light, every screen, every indicator panel, every single source of light on the entire ship went completely dark at the exact same moment. Caleb froze. In 6 years he had never seen that happen. Not once. Not even during the worst equipment failures. He reached for his emergency wrist light and clicked it on. The small white beam cut through the darkness. He stood up slowly and moved toward the engine room door. His first thought was a total power bus failure. It happened sometimes on older ships. The Meridian Star was not a young vessel, but when he opened the engine room door, the engines were still running. He could hear them. He could feel the vibration under his boots. The engines had power. The ship had power. But somehow none of that power was reaching the lights, the screens, or anything else. That made no sense at all. He started moving toward the main corridor to get to the bridge. The ship felt strange. The air had a different quality to it, almost like pressure was changing. He had felt that once before during a hull microfracture scare 2 years ago. His stomach tightened. He reached the corridor and shone his wrist light down the long dark hallway. That was when he saw it. At the far end of the corridor, where the emergency airlock door was, there was a light. But it was not white. It was not the usual blue-green of emergency lighting. It was a deep, warm amber color. like the light of a sunset seen through thick glass. It pulsed slowly, almost like breathing. Caleb stood completely still for a moment. That light had no business being there. There was nothing at that end of the corridor that could produce that color. Nothing at all. His training said to go to the bridge first. Check on the crew. Assess the situation from a position of information. His feet started walking toward the amber light. He could not explain it then, and he could not explain it later. He just moved toward it, like something was pulling him gently but firmly in that direction. Not violently, not painfully. Just a quiet, insistent pull that felt almost like curiosity. The closer he got to the airlock, the warmer the amber light became. And there was a sound now, too. Very faint. Almost like music, but not quite. More like the idea of music. A pattern of tones that rose and fell in a way that felt somehow familiar, even though he had never heard anything like it before in his life. He reached the airlock door. The light was coming from the small circular window in the center of the heavy door. He leaned forward and looked through it. What he saw made him take a full step back. Outside the ship, in the black of space, there was a structure. An enormous structure. It had not been there an hour ago when he had done his walkthrough. He was absolutely certain of that. But it was there now. Close. Massive. And completely covered in that same warm amber light. It was not like any space station he had ever seen in photographs or training materials. Human stations were angular. Industrial. Functional. This thing was curved and layered and organic looking. Like something that had grown rather than been built. It stretched in every direction further than he could see from the small window. It was alive with light and movement. Structures shifted slowly along its surface. Panels rotated in perfect silent arcs. It was beautiful in a way that was almost painful to look at. He was still staring at it, his mouth open, his protein bar forgotten on the floor somewhere behind him, when the airlock door made a sound. A soft click, then a low hiss. He stepped back again. His wrist light flickered. The amber light from the window filled the corridor around him now, warm and golden. The airlock door opened. Not violently. Not explosively. It simply opened, smooth and slow, and completely controlled. As if someone on the other side had a key. Beyond the door was a tunnel. A short connecting passage, maybe 5 meters long, made of a material he had never seen. It was translucent and slightly warm-looking, and through its walls he could see open space and the vast illuminated hull of the enormous station. At the other end of the tunnel was another door, and that door was already open. Beyond it was the station. Caleb Harris stood at the threshold for exactly 4 seconds. He counted them later. In those 4 seconds, his brain gave him about 11 very good reasons to turn around and run back to the bridge and wake up the captain and report this through every proper channel available to him. He stepped through the door. The tunnel sealed behind him before he took his second step. He did not panic. He told himself later that this was because he was trained for emergencies, and panic does not help. In truth, he was simply too stunned to panic yet. His brain was still catching up to what his body had already decided to do. He walked to the other end of the tunnel. He stepped through the open door. He entered the station. The door closed behind him with the same soft click and hiss. The room he stepped into was large and circular. The ceiling was high, maybe 6 meters up, and it glowed with that warm amber light from every surface. The floor was smooth and slightly warm under his boots. The air was breathable, slightly different in flavor than ship air, cleaner somehow, lighter, like mountain air if mountains existed in space. There was no furniture in the room, no screens, no obvious technology. But there were 7 women standing in a perfect arc facing him, and not a single one of them was human. They were tall. The shortest one was at least 6 feet. Their skin came in shades he had no proper names for. The closest he could get was silver blue, warm copper, deep violet, pale green, and others that sat between colors in ways that his earth-born brain struggled to process. Their hair moved slightly even though there was no wind. It flowed and shifted on its own, slowly, like seaweed in deep water. Their eyes were large and luminous. No whites. just deep solid color. Gold and amber and deep ocean blue. They wore fitted garments in dark and muted tones that covered them completely from neck to ankle. The garments had no obvious seams or fastenings. They simply fit, perfectly and elegantly, as if they had been made specifically for each body. They were looking at him, not with hostility, not with fear, with pure, undiluted astonishment. The one in the center, the tallest one, with silver blue skin and hair the color of dark nebula clouds that shifted slowly around her shoulders, took one careful step forward. Her eyes were fixed on his face. She tilted her head slightly to the left, studying him the way a scientist looks at something completely unprecedented under a microscope. Then, she spoke. The sounds she made were layered and complex. Multiple tones at the same time, rising and falling in ways that a human throat simply could not replicate. It was the most extraordinary sound Caleb had ever heard in his life. It was like three instruments playing the same melody in perfect harmony. He understood none of it. He raised both hands slowly, palms out, in the universal gesture that he hoped translated across species as "I am not a threat and please do not kill me." The tall woman in the center looked at his raised hands. Then she looked back at his face. Then she turned slightly to the woman on her right and said something shorter and quieter in that same layered tone. The woman on her right, who had warm copper skin and enormous gold eyes, looked at Caleb with an expression that on a human face would have been described as completely speechless. Caleb lowered his hands slowly. He cleared his throat. "Hi," he said. His voice in the silence of that glowing room sounded incredibly small and incredibly human. The 7 alien women stared at him. And then something happened that he would spend the rest of his life trying to adequately describe to people back on Earth. The tall woman in the center smiled. It was not a human smile. The proportions were slightly different. The movement of the muscles was not quite the same. But the intention behind it was unmistakable across any species barrier. It was warm, it was genuine, and it contained something that looked very much like relief. As if she had been waiting for a very long time. As if he was exactly what she had been hoping for. And as if his arriving here, in this impossible place, at this impossible hour, was not an accident at all. The tall woman's name was not something Caleb could pronounce. Not even close. When she said it, 4 separate tones sounded simultaneously, and the sounds shifted in pitch and texture in a way that required a vocal system completely different from anything a human throat could produce. He tried to repeat it. He failed completely. He tried again. She watched him try with an expression that was clearly trying very hard not to find it funny. She failed at that too. It was the first moment of actual laughter in that room, and it broke something open. A tension Caleb had not fully realized was still sitting in the room, dissolved quietly. He pointed to his own chest. "Caleb," he said. She looked at his hand pointing at his chest. She looked at his face. She repeated the word slowly. "K-Leb." The sounds came out slightly different from her layered voice, but recognizable. Clearly recognizable. His name, coming from her mouth, sounded like music. He nodded. She nodded back. She pointed to herself and said her name again. This time Caleb listened harder. He tried to find the part of it that he could actually make work. There was a sound at the beginning that was closest to the letter V, and something near the middle that was close to an R sound, and the whole thing ended with something like an avra. He tried. She paused. Then she made a gesture with her hand that he would eventually learn meant something like close enough or acceptable. She repeated it the way he had said it. Vra. Then she touched her own chest and said it again. It seemed like she was accepting the simplified version, or at least tolerating it. Vra it was. She gestured for him to follow her. The room they had been standing in opened into a corridor that made the corridors of the Meridian Star look like a utility closet in comparison. It was wide and tall and curved gently, following the arc of the station's outer ring. The walls were lined with something that Caleb could only describe as living light. It moved slowly. It responded to movement. When Vra walked past a section of wall, the light shifted and brightened slightly in her wake, as if acknowledging her presence. The other 6 women followed behind them at a respectful distance. Caleb could feel their eyes on his back, He was very aware that he was the most unusual thing on this station by a significant margin. He tried to walk normally. He probably failed at that too. They passed doors. Many doors, some open, some closed. Through the open ones, Caleb caught glimpses of rooms filled with technology and activity. He saw screens unlike anything human engineers had designed. He saw equipment that had no analog in anything he had ever studied. He saw alien women moving through these rooms with purpose and precision, working, analyzing, communicating. Every single one of them stopped what they were doing when he walked past. Every single one. The looks were not hostile. He kept checking for hostility, because his survival instincts kept demanding that he assess threat levels. But there was no hostility in their expressions. There was shock. There was curiosity. There was something else that he could not name yet, but that felt strangely like excitement. Vra led him to a room that was clearly different from the others. It was smaller, more private. The light in here was softer and warmer. There was furniture. Different from human furniture in its proportions and design, but clearly furniture. Places to sit. A low flat surface that might have been a table. She gestured for him to sit. He sat. She sat across from him. She reached to one side and pressed something on a device that rested on the surface between them. The device activated. It projected a soft holographic display above itself, about 20 centimeters high, showing what appeared to be a star map. He recognized nothing on it. It showed no star systems he had ever been taught to identify. They were either too far from known space, or the map was oriented in a completely different way than human cartography. Then she pointed at the star map and said something. He shook his head. He touched his ear and shook his head, trying to convey that he did not understand. She looked at the device. She adjusted something. The holographic display changed. It showed two figures. One clearly meant to represent her species, tall and elegant with flowing hair. One clearly meant to represent his species, shorter and more compact. A human figure. She pointed at the human figure. She looked at him. Yes, he said. That's me. Human. Human, he pointed at himself. Human, she repeated the word. Yo, man, she said it carefully, deliberately, memorizing it. Then she pointed at herself. She said a word. A single word this time, not her name. Something else. He concentrated. The word sounded like something between Vel and Vael with a soft resonance at the end. He repeated it as best he could. She nodded. He wrote the phonetic version in his head. Vael, their species name, or something close to his ability to say it. They sat across from each other in that softly lit room, two beings from completely different corners of the universe, trying to build a bridge out of sounds and gestures and a holographic display. It was slow. It was frustrating. It was also one of the most remarkable hours of Caleb Harris's entire life. By the end of the first hour, he had learned that she was the commanding officer of this station, the equivalent of a captain or a director. She had authority here. The other women followed her lead. He had also learned, through a combination of gestures and the holographic display and a lot of patient back and forth, that this station had been in this location for a very long time. Decades. Possibly longer. And in all that time, they had encountered humans only in the most indirect of ways. Distant sensor readings. Long-range observations. They knew humans existed somewhere in the galaxy. They had never expected one to appear in their airlock. At one point, Vra pulled up an image on the holographic display. It was a scan of some kind. A biological scan. It showed his body, clearly captured when he came through the airlock. She pointed at it. She pointed at him. She said something and then touched the side of her own head gently. He was not sure what that meant yet. He filed it away. Then she stood and gestured for him to follow again. He followed. She led him to a separate room. Smaller still, but comfortable. There was a sleeping surface along one wall. There were soft furnishings. There was a small area that appeared to serve as a washing facility. There were even what appeared to be food items on a small surface near the door. She had prepared this. Or someone had. Before he arrived. The food was unfamiliar, but it was clearly food, and it had been placed here deliberately. She was giving him a room. She pointed at the room. She pointed at him. She made a gesture he interpreted as "this is yours." He looked at the room. He looked at the food. He looked back at her. "Thank you," he said quietly. She did not understand the words, but something in his tone seemed to reach her. She made that gesture again with her hand, the one that meant acceptable or close enough. And then she left, and the door closed softly behind her. Caleb stood alone in the room. He sat on the sleeping surface. It was surprisingly comfortable. He looked at the food. He did not eat it yet. He sat with his hands on his knees and tried to organize his thoughts into something coherent. He was on an alien space station. An enormous, advanced, completely hidden alien space station, inhabited entirely by beings of one species. All female. Every single one. He had not seen a single male of their kind anywhere. Not one. He had been given a room and food and treated with courtesy. His ship was presumably still attached on the other side of that tunnel. His crew was presumably still asleep and unaware of what had happened to him. He had no way to communicate with them because his personal communicator showed no signal at all. Not a flicker. Whatever the station was doing to suppress electronic signals from his ship, it was doing it completely. He was not a prisoner. The door to his room opened from the inside. He had checked immediately after Vra left. He could leave whenever he wanted. But he could not go back to his ship. The tunnel door was sealed from the station side, and he had no idea how to open it. He was not trapped. But he was not free either. He was somewhere in between. He was a guest. An unexpected, completely unprecedented guest on a secret alien station in a region of space that should have been empty. He lay back on the sleeping surface and stared at the ceiling, which glowed softly amber above him. He thought about a lot of things. The last thing he thought before he fell asleep, which surprised him by happening much sooner than he would have expected, was that the woman named Vra had smiled at him. And that the smile had looked like relief, and that the biological scan she had shown him had made her touch the side of her own head in a way that felt almost like recognition, like she had seen something in his biology that she had been hoping to find. He fell asleep with that thought hanging in the amber light, and in his sleep, faintly, at the very edge of hearing, he heard that music again, the not quite music, the patterns of tone that rose and fell like breathing. It sounded almost like welcome. When Caleb woke up, he was not alone in the room. He sat up fast. His heart rate spiked immediately. 3 alien women were standing near the door. Not Vra. 3 others. They were younger looking, he thought, though he was still learning to read age in their faces. They had the same luminous eyes and slowly moving hair and elegant bearing as the women he had seen the night before. They were also holding things. One of them held a flat device. Another held a container that clearly contained food or liquid. The third held what appeared to be a bundle of fabric. They were not threatening him. They were looking at him with that same intense, undisguised curiosity that he was already starting to recognize as their default expression when they looked at him. He held up a hand. "Morning," he said. The one with the flat device pointed it at him briefly and then looked at the screen. She said something quietly to the others. Her tone was one of surprised interest. The one with the fabric moved forward and placed it on the sleeping surface beside him. She stepped back immediately, giving him space, showing him she meant no threat. The fabric was clearly clothing, different from anything he owned. It was dark and soft, and appeared to be sized for his dimensions, which was interesting because they would have needed to know his dimensions, which meant the biological scan from the night before had done more than just say he was human. He looked at the clothing. He looked at the 3 women. He gestured toward the door, asking with his eyes if they could give him a moment of privacy. He was not sure if they would understand. The one with the flat device said something to the others. All 3 of them moved to the door and stepped out into the corridor. The door did not fully close. It left a gap of about 10 centimeters. He was not sure if that was intentional or not. He decided not to think about it too hard and got changed quickly. The new clothing fit perfectly. Not approximately. Perfectly. He had no explanation for how that was possible on such a short timeline. He made a mental note to add it to the growing list of things he could not explain. When he stepped into the corridor, the three women were waiting. The one with the device pointed it at him again, briefly. He decided it was some kind of scanning or monitoring tool and resolved to not be alarmed by it. They then gestured for him to follow. They led him through a different set of corridors than the ones Vra had shown him. He was already trying to build a mental map of the station, but it was enormous and the layout was not linear in any way he was used to. There was no simple grid. The station seemed to follow organic logic rather than engineering logic. Corridors curved and connected in ways that felt more like a living organism than a constructed facility. They brought him to a large open room. It was different from everything else he had seen. It was quieter. The light here was cooler, more blue than amber. The room was full of what he eventually realized were workstations, but designed for learning, not for active operations. There were displays and devices and what appeared to be collections of recorded material. Vra was already there. She looked up when he entered. She gestured for him to approach. She had clearly been waiting for him. On the display in front of her was something that took him a moment to recognize. And when he did recognize it, he stopped walking for a second. It was a human language learning framework. She had been studying his language overnight. Not just looking at it, actually working through it. The display showed what appeared to be a structured analysis of English language patterns, grammar, syntax, common vocabulary grouped by frequency of use. She pointed at the display. She looked at him. She said, in English, with an accent that was completely unlike anything he had heard before, every syllable precisely produced, "Good morning, Caleb Harris." He stared at her. "Good morning," he said. "Please," she said carefully, "sit." He sat. She sat across from him. She pulled the display closer. She had a pronunciation that was technically perfect but tonally strange, like a perfect instrument playing a piece of music in a scale that was slightly shifted from familiar. Every word was correct. The melody of it was alien. "I have studied," she said, picking her words with visible care, "some of your language. It is less complex than ours, but interesting." She paused. "I am sorry. My words are few now. They will be more soon." He was absolutely speechless. "You learned English overnight?" he asked. She considered the question. "I learned the structure and the most used words. She paused, searching for the right term. "My memory works differently than yours." He thought about the biological scan. He thought about her touching the side of her head. "How differently?" he asked. She seemed to think about how much to say. "We remember everything," she said simply. "Everything we have ever learned. Everything we have ever experienced. Completely. Permanently." He let that sit for a moment. "Everything?" he said. "Everything," she confirmed. He thought about what that would mean. What it would feel like to carry every single memory you had ever made with perfect clarity for your entire life. He could not decide if it sounded wonderful or unbearable. "Is that?" He hesitated. "Is that hard?" She looked at him. Something moved through her expression that he could not fully read yet. "Sometimes," she said. They sat with that answer for a moment. Then she straightened slightly and the expression shifted to something more focused and purposeful. "I have questions," she said. "So do I," he replied. "You may ask yours first," she said. Which he noted. A deliberate courtesy. Or a deliberate tactic to understand what he knew and what he wanted before she revealed more of her own hand. He had about 1,000 questions. He started with the one that felt most urgent. "Where exactly am I?" he asked. She pulled up the star map holographic display again. She pointed to a region that was completely blank on any human star chart he had ever studied. A void. An unmapped stretch of deep space that human survey missions had tagged as empty and not worth further investigation. "This region," she said, "is not what your people think it is." "Clearly," he said. "There are structures here," she continued, her English growing slightly more fluid as she spoke. as if the language was settling into her more comfortably in real time. This station, and others, all hidden. He felt a cold clarity settle over him. Others? He said. This is one of many, she said. But this is the oldest. And this is the most. She paused, looking for the word. Important. Why? She looked at him for a long moment before answering. Because of what we are doing here, she said. He waited. She pulled up a different display. This one showed what appeared to be biological schematics, DNA mappings. Genetic sequences rendered in a way that was visually unlike human genetic diagrams but clearly serving the same purpose. We have been here for a very long time, she said quietly. Working on a problem. A serious problem. Our species is... She searched for the word. Failing. Slowly. Over many generations. Something in our biology is changing. Something is being lost. We have been trying to understand it for a very long time. He looked at the genetic schematics. He looked at her face. Something cold and significant was crystallizing in his mind. And you were scanning me when I came through the airlock, he said slowly. Yes, she said. Why? She met his eyes. Her enormous gold and amber irises held something in them that was complex and careful and significant. Because, she said, we have been looking for a biological solution. For many years, we have searched many species. Nothing has worked. Nothing has been compatible. The cold clarity was fully formed now. Until, he said. Until your scan, she said. Until last night. The room was very quiet. What did my scan show? He asked. She looked at the genetic display. She looked back at him. A match, she said simply. Caleb Harris, maintenance engineer on the Meridian Star, 32 years old, not famous, not special in any way that would make headlines back on Earth, sat in a room on a hidden alien station in the middle of deep space and felt the entire known universe rearrange itself around him. A match for what, exactly? He asked very carefully. She held his gaze. A match for what our species needs in order to survive, she said. And in the cool blue light of that room, with 7 billion humans asleep on a blue planet millions of miles away and completely unaware, the most important conversation in the history of two civilizations began. He did not panic. He wanted to be clear about that, at least in his own mind. He did not panic. He sat very still and breathed carefully and thought about what she had just said with as much calm and precision as he could manage. A match. His biology was a match for something their species needed to survive. His first instinct was the obvious one, the one any human being would jump to immediately. He pushed it aside for a moment, not because it was wrong necessarily, but because he needed more information before he reacted to it. Reacting to the wrong interpretation of something this significant could go very badly in several different directions. Tell me more about the problem, he said. The biological problem. Specifically. Vra looked at him with what appeared to be appreciation for the measured way he had responded. She pulled up the genetic schematics again and began to speak carefully, choosing each English word with deliberate precision. The Vial, as he was beginning to think of them, had been experiencing what she described as a generational degradation, a slow but progressive weakening in certain genetic sequences that governed neural development. It had started very subtly, generations ago, so subtly that it had not been recognized as a problem for a long time. By the time their scientists understood what was happening, it had already progressed significantly. The specific sequences involved governed memory formation and retention, the very thing she had described to him earlier. Their ability to remember everything. Perfectly. Permanently. It was not just a trait. It was central to how the Vial thought and communicated and built knowledge across generations. Without it, the accumulation of knowledge that had allowed their civilization to reach its current level was not possible in the same way. And it was fading. Generation by generation. The next generation remembered less than the last. The generation after that, less still. In another few hundred years, the projection showed that the capability would be so diminished as to be functionally equivalent to ordinary biological memory. To a human, ordinary biological memory might not sound like a catastrophic loss. But to a civilization that had been built entirely on perfect perpetual recall across every individual, The implications were devastating. And you cannot fix it from within your own biology? He asked. We have tried, she said. For 140 of your years, every approach. Nothing works from within. The sequence is too degraded to repair internally. We need an external input. A compatible sequence from outside our biology that can be integrated and restore the original pattern. And my Dina has that sequence? He said. Something close to it, she said. Close enough to be workable. We have not found anything this close before. Not in any species we have studied. He processed this carefully. How many species have you studied? 11. She said. And none of them matched. None came close, she said. Until you. He was quiet for a moment. How did I get here? He asked. I mean specifically. The tunnel. The doors opening. Was that you? She did not answer immediately. Vrah, he said. Yes, she said, it was us. We detected your ship on long-range sensors 3 days ago. We ran preliminary scans from distance. Your biology registered as a possible match. We made a decision to bring you closer for a full scan. You moved my ship? He said. We moved it gently, she said. And we brought you here gently. We did not harm you or your ship. He thought about the lights going out. The amber glow. The pull he had felt toward the airlock door. The feeling, he said. The pull I felt. Was that you too? She had the grace to look something close to uncomfortable. We used a low-frequency resonance signal, she said. It affects the navigation centers of most biological brains gently. It was not meant to override your will. More like a suggestion. He looked at her. A suggestion I could not resist. We made the door very easy to walk through, she said simply. He took a breath. He thought about being angry about this. He had been manipulated, technically. Guided here without his knowledge or consent. He had been scanned while unconscious. His ship had been moved without permission. But he also looked at her face, at the careful, honest way she was answering his questions now that he was asking them directly. She could have told him nothing. She could have manipulated him further, kept him in the dark, let him believe his arrival was entirely accidental until she had whatever she needed. She was telling him the truth instead. Uncomfortable truth. Delivered carefully but delivered honestly. My crew, he said. Are they safe? Completely, she said immediately. They are sleeping. A harmless signal maintains their rest. When you return, they will wake naturally. They will not know how much time has passed. How much time has passed? He asked. For them, it will feel like approximately 8 hours, she said. Normal night rest. He noted that she had not answered exactly how much time had actually passed in objective terms. He noted it, and let it go for now. And my ship? It is safe? Completely, she said again. He nodded slowly. He looked at the genetic schematics on the display. He looked at her face. You said you need an input from my biology, he said carefully. What exactly does that mean in practice? She met his eyes. Nothing that harms you, she said clearly and immediately. I want to be clear about that first. Nothing that causes you pain or damage or takes anything from you that you would miss. That is reassuring, he said, but not specific. She allowed something that might have been a small smile. We would need a biological sample, she said. Genetic material, from which we can isolate the specific sequence, then synthesize it, then integrate it into our own biology over time. You would give us a sample. We would do the rest ourselves. You would not be involved in the process beyond that. He considered this. In human medical terms, they were essentially asking for a blood sample or something equivalent. A biological sample from which they could extract and synthesize a specific genetic sequence. And this would work? He asked. It would actually restore the lost capability in your species? Our models show a high probability of success, she said. High enough that we have been searching for 140 years to find this. He looked at her for a long moment. Why are you all women? He asked. I have been here for hours, and I have not seen a single male of your species. Not one. Something moved through her expression. Something heavy. We have no males, she said. He waited. The males of our species, she said slowly, were the first to lose the memory sequence, much faster than the females. It progressed in them rapidly. The last male with intact capability died 230 years ago. He felt the weight of that land. And the males since then? He said. The males born since then, she said carefully, do not have the neural architecture to maintain our civilization in the way it needs to be maintained. They live. They are not harmed. But they live elsewhere, separately, in a way that is comfortable for them. He looked around at the station, at the extraordinary complex civilization that surrounded him, maintained entirely by women of one species, slowly watching something essential in their biology dim, for 200 years. I am sorry, he said quietly. He meant it completely. She looked at him. You are the first being outside our species to have said that to us, she said. They sat with that for a moment. Yes, he said finally. She looked at him. Yes? She said. Yes, I will give you the sample, he said. Of course I will. I am not going to say no to that. Not now that I understand what it means. Vra, commanding officer of the oldest and most important hidden station of the Vale civilization, looked at Caleb Harris from Earth with an expression that he now had enough familiarity to read clearly. It was relief. Deep, complete, overwhelming relief. The kind that comes after a very, very long wait. Thank you, she said. 2 words in his own language. Simple and quiet, and carrying every ounce of 140 years of searching. He nodded. He looked at the genetic schematics one more time. Then he looked at her. I have one condition, he said. She waited. I want to know everything, he said. About this station, about your people, about your history. All of it. Everything you are willing to share. I want to understand. He paused. Humanity has been alone in the universe for as long as we have existed. We have always looked up at the sky and wondered. We deserve to know that we are not alone, even if only one of us knows it at first. She considered this for a long time. Then she made the gesture he now recognized, the one that meant acceptable. Deal, she said. In his language. Perfectly. The next 4 days were unlike anything Caleb had ever experienced. Vra was true to her word. She opened the station to him, not all at once, and not all at the same depth, but she gave him access in expanding circles, bringing him deeper into the life and work and history of this place with every passing day. He learned that the station did not have a single name. The Vale did not name places the way humans did. They identified locations by a combination of coordinates and characteristics, described in their layered tonal language in ways that functioned more like a poem than an address. The closest English translation Vra offered him was something like the old place at the center of the search. He privately started calling it the station. She found this amusing in her quiet way. He learned that there were approximately 4,000 Vale on board, not the 7 or 15 he had seen in his first hours. 4,000. The station was larger than he had understood, organized into deep internal rings that he had not yet accessed. The 7 he had first met were the senior council. The 3 who had brought him clothing and food were junior scientists assigned to his care and study. Being studied was something he was getting used to. Everywhere he went on the station he attracted attention. The Vale were not rude about it. They did not crowd him or touch him without warning. But they watched. With those luminous eyes and that intense undisguised curiosity that was their nature. He was the first human male any of them had ever seen in person. He was also, by extension of his biology, the most significant visitor their civilization had received in over a century. No pressure. He spent long hours with Vra in the learning room. Her English improved at a rate that was frankly unsettling. By the 2nd day she was speaking it fluently. By the 3rd day she was using idioms. By the 4th day she occasionally corrected his grammar, which she delivered with such perfect deadpan that he could not tell if she was joking or not. He was not sure she ever joked. He was not sure the Vale had humor in the human sense. And then on the afternoon of the 3rd day, she made a comment about his attempts to learn even basic Vale language that was so precisely timed and so accurately targeted that he laughed for a full 30 seconds while she watched with that small, almost smile. They had humor. It was just very dry and very precise. He learned their history. Not all of it. Thousands of years of Vial civilization could not be summarized in 4 days. But she gave him the shape of it. They had originated from a planet in a system that his star charts did not include. They had achieved space travel approximately 3,000 years ago by human counting. They had encountered 11 other species during those 3,000 years. None hostile, none as biologically surprising as humans. They had built the network of hidden stations over the course of the last 500 years. During a period of their history they described as the Long Retreat, a time when they had chosen to pull back from active contact with the wider galaxy and focus inward, to protect their knowledge, to work on the biological problem. The Long Retreat had been a calculated and painful choice. Withdrawing from known space, hiding, becoming a civilization of waiting. He asked her if she resented it. The waiting. She was quiet for a long time before she answered. I did not choose it, she said. The ones who came before me chose it. I was born into the waiting. She looked at the walls of the station with an expression he was learning to read as something between acceptance and grief. But I understood why they chose it. Every generation has understood. We have kept the knowledge. We have kept the capability, what is left of it, for as long as possible. Because if we had not, there would have been nothing left to save when the solution finally arrived. He thought about that. And now it has arrived, he said. You arrived, she said. I was eating a protein bar and reading a novel, he said. She looked at him. And yet, she said. On the afternoon of the 4th day, the biological sample was taken. It was done by the Vale medical staff with a level of care and precision that made human medical procedures look approximate by comparison. The procedure was painless. It took less than 4 minutes. They took a sample of blood and a swab of cellular tissue from the inside of his cheek. That was it. Afterward, the lead medical officer, a Vale woman with pale green skin and the most focused expression he had ever seen on any face of any species, looked at the sample under their analysis equipment and said something to Vra in their language. Her tone was unmistakable even without translation. It was the tone of someone who has just confirmed that something they waited a very long time for is real. Vra translated without being asked. She says the sequence is clear and complete, she said. She says the synthesis process should work. Should, Caleb noted. Science is honest, Vra said simply. He nodded. How long will the synthesis take? To create the first generation of integration? She said. Approximately 3 of your years. To see whether it works in a meaningful way? A generation. Perhaps 20 years. He looked at her. You will not know in your own lifetime if it worked, he said. I will know that the process began, she said. I will know that the right element was found and that the work started. That is enough. She paused. That is what the Long Retreat was for. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You said there are others. Other stations. You will share this with them? Yes, she said. Immediately. This affects all of us. And the males of your species? He asked carefully. If the capability is restored, what happens to them? She looked at him. Her expression was careful. The future, she said, is something none of us can fully predict. But restoring the capability does not change who our males are now. It changes what future generations may be. It is not a simple solution to everything. It is a beginning. He understood that. Beginnings were not solutions, they were just starts. On the evening of the 4th day, Vra came to his room. She stood at the door. He had the impression that she had thought carefully about coming, that it was not an impulsive visit. Tomorrow, she said, we will return you to your ship. He had known it was coming. He nodded. Your crew will wake. Your ship will be released. You will be able to leave and return to your normal route. He nodded again. And the tunnel? The station? Will I be able to find it again if I wanted to? She looked at him steadily. We will find you, she said, if we choose to make contact again. The station cannot be found from outside unless we allow it. Right, he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You did something important here, Caleb Harris. I want you to understand that. You did not have to say yes. You did not have to trust us. You could have refused or been afraid or been angry. You were none of those things." He thought about this honestly. "I was a little afraid," he said. "Yes," she said. "But you did not let it decide for you." He looked at her. "Can I tell anyone?" he asked. "Back on Earth, can I tell anyone what happened here?" She considered this carefully. "We cannot stop you," she said. "We do not control you. But we ask that you think carefully about how that would go. Whether the world you come from is ready for what you would tell them. Whether it would help or cause fear." He thought about Earth. He thought about the news cycles and the political climate, and the way things got twisted when they were too big and too strange for ordinary frameworks. He thought about what people did when they encountered things they did not understand. "Not yet," he said quietly. "I will not tell anyone yet." She looked at him. "That is generous," she said. "That is practical," he said. She made the gesture. "Acceptable." She turned to leave. Then she stopped. She turned back. She said something in Vael, something longer and more complex than anything she had said to him in English. He did not understand a word of it. But the tone was unmistakable. It was warm and genuine, and it carried weight. "What does that mean?" he asked. She thought about how to translate it. "It means," she said slowly, "that you came from far away, and you came unexpected, and you came without being asked. And you gave what was needed freely. And because of that, a people who had forgotten how to hope have started to remember what it feels like." He had no answer for that. There was no answer worthy of it. He nodded once. She nodded back. She left. He sat in his room in the amber light and did not sleep for a long time. The morning came quietly. There was no dramatic ceremony, no formal gathering of 4,000 Vael women watching him walk to the airlock. He had half expected something like that, given the significance of what had happened. But when Vra came to his door at what he had calibrated to be approximately 0600 station time, it was just her and the 3 junior scientists who had taken care of him since his first morning. He had a moment of unexpected difficulty with that, with the smallness of the goodbye. Not because he wanted ceremony, but because the size of what had happened between them felt too large to fit into a quiet morning walk down a corridor. He followed Vra back through the curving, organically logical hallways of the station. He tried to memorize the path this time. He knew it was futile. The station was too vast and too non-linear for any human to map in 4 days. But he tried anyway. They passed some of the rooms he had visited. The learning room where Vra had waited for him on his second morning, with a night's worth of English already inside her perfect memory. The medical bay where the sample had been taken. The wide corridor on the outer ring where the living light moved in the walls and responded to motion. He stopped once. In front of a window. A real window, not a screen. Looking out into open space, the stars were extraordinary from here. Brilliant and dense and deep. He stood there for about 15 seconds and just looked at them. Vra stood beside him and looked at them too. "Do you ever go out there?" he asked. "Still, despite the long retreat." "Some of us do," she said. "For specific purposes. Carefully. And after this?" he said. "If the synthesis works. In 20 years, will you come back out into the wider galaxy?" She looked at the stars for a moment before answering. "That decision is not mine alone," she said. "But I think yes. Eventually. We were not meant to hide forever. The long retreat was not meant to be permanent. It was meant to be long enough." She paused. "Perhaps it has been long enough." He looked at the stars one more time. Then he followed her to the airlock corridor. The tunnel was open. Through the translucent walls he could see the familiar hull of the Meridian star on the other side. Looking the same as always, battered and functional, and deeply, almost painfully ordinary. He stopped at the threshold. He turned to face Vra. She was looking at him with that expression he had seen on the first night, the one that had looked like relief. It still looked like relief, but it also looked like something else now. Warmer, more personal, built out of 4 days of shared meals and careful conversations and late evenings in the learning room, and the specific closeness that develops between two beings who have tried very hard to understand each other across a gap that should not have been bridgeable. "Thank you," he said, "for trusting me, for telling me the truth, for the food, and the room, and the clothing." He paused. "For everything." She was quiet for a moment. "Thank you," she said in his language, "for walking through the door." He almost said something else. He was not sure exactly what. The moment had a quality to it that suggested more words were possible. More and different kinds of words, but some things, across some distances, are better left complete in their simplicity. He turned and walked through the tunnel. When he stepped back through the Meridian Star's airlock and the door sealed behind him, the amber light faded. The familiar white light of the ship's normal systems flickered, and then came back on. Every screen, every panel, every indicator light. Normal. Completely normal, as if nothing had ever happened. He stood in the corridor for a moment. He heard, from somewhere forward, the familiar sound of someone moving in the galley. Early riser on the crew making coffee. The smell of it drifted back to him a moment later. Coffee on a human ship in deep space. The most ordinary smell in the universe. He walked to the nearest porthole and looked out. The space beyond it was empty. Stars. Black. Nothing else. No amber light. No vast organic structure. No living light moving along curved walls. Gone. As completely and silently as it had appeared. He stood there for a long moment. His hand came up and rested flat against the cold porthole glass. He looked at the empty space where it had been. 3 years, she had said, for the synthesis to begin. 20 years to know if it worked. He would be in his 50s by the time there was any confirmation. He would not be there to see it. He would not know if the sequence integrated successfully. If the memory capability was restored. If the long retreat ended. If 4,000 women on a hidden station in a region of space that should have been empty eventually came back out into the wider galaxy and changed everything. He would carry what happened in these 4 days for the rest of his life. Perfectly remembered in his ordinary human memory, which would fade and blur and reorganize with time the way human memory always did. And somewhere out there, in a hidden station, 4,000 beings with perfect permanent memory would carry these 4 days too. Every word, every expression, every 15 seconds spent looking at stars through a window together. Every careful English sentence built overnight from scratch. Perfect. Permanent. Forever. He found some comfort in that. He pushed off the porthole and walked toward the galley for coffee. His colleague, a young engineer named Soren, looked up from the coffee maker with bleary eyes. "Early morning for you," Soren said. "Couldn't sleep," Caleb said. Soren handed him a coffee. "Bad dreams?" Caleb looked at the coffee. He looked at the corridor. He looked at the porthole at the end of it and the dark ordinary space beyond it that contained more than it appeared. "No," he said. "Good ones, actually." He drank the coffee. He went back to his station. He checked all his systems. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. He sat in the maintenance bay where 8 hours ago, in what felt like another lifetime, he had been eating a protein bar and reading a novel about hidden kingdoms. The novel was still there on the floor where he had dropped it when the lights went out. He picked it up. He found his page. He started reading. He got 3 pages further than he had before. Then he stopped. He looked at the page. He thought about a civilization that had forgotten how to hope and was just starting to remember. He thought about Vra saying the words "good morning" in a language she had taught herself overnight, using a memory that held everything forever. He closed the book. He would finish it later. Right now it felt small compared to what was sitting in his chest. He reached into his pocket. Inside was something he had not told Vra about. Something he had taken from his room on the station before leaving, picked up quietly from the small table beside his sleeping surface, where it had been placed without explanation sometime during his 4 days there. A small flat object. smooth and dark, slightly warm even now. When he held it and pressed his thumb to the center, it projected a tiny holographic image, no bigger than his palm. A star map, with one location marked, clearly, precisely, in a region of space that should have been empty. He looked at it for a long time. She had left him a way back. Not a guarantee, not a promise, not an open door, just the coordinates. What he did with them was entirely his choice. He closed his hand around the small device. He put it back in his pocket. He thought about the future, his own, and the one he had set in motion without planning to, by walking through a door one unremarkable night in the middle of his very ordinary life. Beginnings were not solutions. They were just starts. She had been right about that. But this beginning, he thought, was a very good one. Here is the part of this story that will stay with you, after everything else fades. Caleb Harris was nobody special. He was not a scientist or a soldier or an explorer. He was not chosen for his intelligence or his courage or any particular quality that a committee would have selected for a mission of this kind. He was chosen because of something in his DNA that he did not know he had. A sequence that his biology carried without his knowledge or effort or intention. Something that was simply part of what? #outro and call to action. And that is where we leave Caleb Harris today. A man who woke up on an ordinary night, ate a protein bar, read a novel, and accidentally changed the fate of an entire civilization before breakfast. He did not set out to be a hero. He did not train for this moment. He did not even fully understand what he was walking into when he stepped through that airlock door. But he walked through it anyway, with open hands and an open mind. And that made all the difference across two worlds that had never spoken before. There are three things from this story that deserve to sit with you. First, the greatest discoveries in any universe do not always come to the people who are looking for them. Sometimes they come to the person who simply shows up and pays attention and chooses trust over fear when the moment arrives. Second, a civilization that chose to wait rather than give up is a civilization that understood something profound, that some things are worth protecting across generations, even when the reward is not yours to see. The Vial waited 140 years for an answer. They kept the light on that whole time. That is not weakness. That is extraordinary strength. Third, and this is the one that quietly reshapes everything else. Somewhere in the biology of an ordinary person is something that another world has been searching for across the stars. We carry things inside us that we do not know about. Things that matter in ways we cannot yet imagine. That idea applies to science fiction. And if you think about it honestly, it applies to real life too. If this story opened your eyes and kept you watching all the way to this final moment, then you are exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. This is Sci-Fi. And we tell stories about what happens when humanity shows up in the universe and surprises everyone, including itself. If you made it this far and you felt something during this story, whether it was wonder or curiosity or that specific feeling when a piece of fiction says something true about real life, then hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it tells us that stories like this one are worth making more of. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already. Every single week we bring you new Heffa stories that are written to keep you watching from the first word to the last. No filler, no wasted minutes, just stories that pull you in and do not let go until the very end. And leave a comment below with your answer to this question. We genuinely want to know. If you were Caleb Harris, and you held those coordinates in your hand, would you go back? Would you return to the station? Would you make contact again? Would you tell someone back on Earth what you had found? Or would you keep the secret and carry it alone for the rest of your life? There is no right answer. But we want to hear yours. Drop it in the comments right now. The best answers always come from this community, and we read every single one. And if this story left you wanting more, the next video is already waiting for you. It is another Hafey story, another human, another impossible situation, another moment where the universe underestimates what a person from Earth is capable of. Click it now and let us keep going together. We will see you in the next one.